Hey, what's up, y'all? It's Ebony Christina from ebonychristina.com. Today I want to talk about Crash Pads. Crash Pads are basically shared living space for flight attendants who don't live in the city where they're based. Crash Pads are a shared living space where they can come, stay there, have some place to sleep, and keep their things for the days that they are flying and the days that they are in town and on reserve. Crash pads are usually used by flight attendants who are on reserve because when you're on reserve, your schedule is really unstable. You don't know when you're coming, you don't know when you're going. So it's always good to have a crash pad where you're based. So that way, if anything shall happen, if you get stuck in base when you should have been home, or if you have a flight cancellation, you have somewhere warm that you can lay your head and refresh and get started for the next day. One of the pros of living in a crash pad is the fact that, number one, there's no commitment because you're not bound by a lease. You save money because you won't be paying as much money as you would if you were renting your own apartment, and even sometimes if you were getting an apartment with roommates. You can save a lot of money by staying in a crash pad. Crash pads are usually pretty convenient because they're located near the airport, so it's an easy commute to and from the airport on the days that you have to work, and it's especially handy for those days that you're on reserve and you have to report to the airport almost immediately. Some of the cons of being in a crash pad, obviously, is the fact that it's a shared space. If you don't like living with people, if living around a lot of people kind of freaks you out a little bit, crash pads aren't for you, because crash pads can have a lot of occupants. Sometimes they can have as little as 4 people, and sometimes a crash pad can have 20 plus people. So you really want to, if living around a lot of people isn't really your thing, then I would probably think of an alternative from a crash pad. So there's 2 types of crash pads. There are same-sex crash pads and there are co-ed crash pads. I've actually had the experience of staying in both. The very first crash pad I had was when I was working as a regional flight attendant, and this was a same-sex crash pad. Now this was a pretty good situation for me because the crash pad, there was an individual room with a crash pad, there were bunk beds and individual beds. So I chose to get the individual room. Very small room, nothing big or spectacular, but it did give me my own space. But outside of that, there was also a room that had bunk beds, which was cheaper, and you can also get a single individual bed, but there were several in a room, but they were just like bunk beds lined up. You have that option as well. But I decided to go with the single room for myself, and I paid just a little more, but it was still inexpensive compared to renting my own apartment or actually getting a roommate situation with several people, and that would have also been a commitment. And at the time that I decided to get into a crash pad, there was no commitment. And that's one of the things that I actually do enjoy about crash pads, is the fact that you don't have any commitment. Most crash pads just require that you give them 30 days notice prior to moving, and that's it. You don't have to sign a lease, you don't have to be under contract or anything. It's pretty much a month-to-month situation. So if you're new to your base and you don't know, you're not for sure yet whether this is going to be a long-term base for you, you're kind of just filling it out, I think a crash pad will work very well because it'll give you time without committing to a full lease to figure things out. The second crash pad that I lived in was actually co-ed, and this had both men and women flight attendants, and most of us, I think all of us except for one person, worked for the same airline. So it was pretty cool. We had a lot in common. We were all around the same age range. Some of us were new flight attendants, some were new flight attendants, some had been flying for a very long time. So it was a really good mixture of people, and a lot of us were from all over the country. Now in this crash pad, it wasn't as comfortable for me because there were so many people. This crash pad actually had room for like 20 girls. Yeah, this home had room for 20 girls, and it was all bunk beds. It was actually a full crash pad when I arrived, which is why I got stuck with the top bunk, and I never even got to get a bottom bunk. I'm no longer staying in that crash pad just because I just couldn't take it. But crash pads aren't that bad. You just have to find one that's comfortable for you and kind of get a feel for it. But my suggestion is to find one that you're comfortable in, you like the people, it's in a great area, and the price is actually reasonable. Transportation to and from the airport, I would recommend getting a crash pad that offers shuttle service. Some crash pads do actually offer transportation to and from the airport, and usually the crash pads are located within probably about 5 miles within the airport anyhow. So it's an easy shuttle. So they offer a transportation shuttle for the flight attendants, day or night. Also, you can Uber. Uber is always an option, but Uber does cost. I Ubered I did Uber or Lyft from my crash pad to my base. That was probably around, I would say on average between $6 and $7 each way, and it does add up. So you can get a crash pad that offers transportation. That's going to be your best bet, unless you have your car, and in that case you're fine. You can always park in the employee parking lot, so you don't have to worry about the Ubering or Lyft or anything. The rate of crash pads varies. It depends on where it's located. A crash pad that's located in LA, San Francisco, New York are going to be a little more expensive than a crash pad that's located in Charlotte, North Carolina or Detroit, Michigan. When you're looking for a crash pad, there's one thing you want to be sure to look for, and it's whether or not that crash pad offers hot beds or cold beds. Now, hot beds are the beds that are actually being used by multiple flight attendants. So a flight attendant needs a bed, they take that bed that's available, they obviously change the sheets, and then once they're done, they wake up in the morning, they take all their things, including the sheets, and they go on about their day. The next flight attendant comes, they use that bed, and so on and so forth. So it isn't your own bed, it's a shared bed. That is what a hot bed is. Now, a cold bed is actually your own bed. I've always had cold beds, and that means that that's my bed, those are my sheets, no one else is sleeping in my bed. Crash pads, they either have bunk beds or single beds. If you decide to get a single bed, it's going to cost you a little more, but you will have a little more space. You don't have anyone over your head or anyone under you, and you have that space under your bed for storage, which will come in handy in a crash pad. The more storage you can get in a crash pad, the better. Some ways to find a crash pad are through Facebook. You can search for Facebook groups that host crash pads where people post when they are either looking to fill a crash pad, or people can post when they're seeking to rent a room in a crash pad. Another way is at your base. There's usually bulletins or posters posted of crash pads that has beds available. Also, word of mouth. Ask your fellow flight attendants in the base that you live in. Ask the flight attendants that you fly with. Ask your instructors, and even ask your classmates in training, because usually the best crash pads get around through word of mouth. If you were to ask me if I would live in a crash pad again, my answer would be yes. I wouldn't mind staying in another crash pad as long as it's similar to my first experience and not so much my second experience. If it's a crash pad that is comfortable, it has not as many flight attendants, I would say maybe under 6 flight attendants, preferably flight attendants who have lines and are not on reserve, including myself. I would do that crash pad situation because I wouldn't plan to be there often anyhow. I wouldn't do a crash pad situation with bunk beds and 20 plus different guys and girls. I wouldn't do that. For more information about crash pads and to read the blog post for this video, make sure you visit ebonychristina.com. I'll put the link in the description. And if you're interested in learning how to become a flight attendant, be sure you check out my new book, The Fly Girl's Guide, How to Become a Flight Attendant, where I teach you in a step-by-step guide exactly what it takes and what you need to do in order to earn your wings. Thank you so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to my channel, like this video, comment, and also share with your friends. I'll see you guys next time. Mwah.